Hi, my name's Sally Hughes, and latterly I was a lead nurse here at Glasgow Royal Infirmary within the Medical Directorate. I started my nurse training here in Glasgow Royal Infirmary in August 1976, a class of around 60 people, and I still quite clearly remember my first day quite dauntingly walking through the GRI to the colonnade and into the nursing home to meet up with all of these new colleagues, and met a friend that day who's been one of my friends for the past 45 years still, and we're still very close, and that's a lovely memory that I keep with me. I remember as well our first day receiving our uniform. White dress, white shoes, had to be American tan tights. We had a blue cardigan and a black cloak, and it reminded me of Nurse Nancy in The Twinkle, which was one of my favourite comics when I was a wee girl, but I was now a real nurse. I spent 3 years training through Glasgow Royal Infirmary, Duke Street Hospital, Lightburn, Belvedere, Cannisburn, Gartlock, Lennox Castle hospitals, Rotten Row, and the Eastern District with the district nurses. So wide and varied training that we had, which stood us in very good stead for the rest of our careers, and mine especially. So I then, when I finished and became a staff nurse, worked in Ward 9 within the medical area here. Initially planned to be there for 2 years, and 23 years later I left. I was a ward sister there, which latterly became ward managers, and I had a great time in Ward 9. I loved it. I worked with many interesting and characterful nurses and doctors. Again, at that time, the doctors had their pristine white coats, shirts and ties. Everyone was immaculately dressed. They weren't allowed into the ward if their coats were dirty. So we had very high standards in that respect, and I maintained that with nurses and medical staff throughout the years working in the wards. Things are a bit more casual nowadays. I also remember quite vividly when we no longer required to wear our nursing caps, and that was a terrible bereavement for me because I loved wearing my hat. So I had many years learning new things, developing new things. Some of the medical staff I worked with were very forward thinking and forerunners in new developments and treatments and investigations, and I clearly remember at times doing Blue Peter, working with tubes and elastoplast and whatnot to try and find some way of developing a new sort of treatment or test to organise somebody's care. And latterly, these things were then developed by teams who then got processing and such like. So it was great fun being part of that. Within nursing, loads and loads of changes over the years within the ward. Within that 20 odd years, nurse training changed 3 times. So we had to relearn the different practices, the different ways that we would be educating students from when we learned. When I was a student, we learned from each other. There were very few trained nurses in the wards when I was a student. We helped each other. Senior students ran the wards, and just now the thought of that is terrifying. But we were in charge of wards on day shift and night shift, supported by maybe 2 or 3 staff nurses and the ward sister. So we had to learn on our feet, and it stood us very well for future. Also working within the wards, the junior doctors at that time, and I know everybody thinks they're very hard work now, but junior doctors at that time, when they worked in the wards, worked for 2 months. They had a 2-month stint in the ward, and during that 2 months they never had a day off. They worked every single day in that 2 months. On a Saturday and a Sunday they might get an afternoon off unless they were on call, and they were on call probably 2 nights a week while they were still working during the day. So they had a tough gig, but at least we got to go home to our own beds at night, but most of the time they had to stay here on site and be ruled with a rod of iron by the consultants as well. Nursing's changed lots, very much of it for the better. There's many more developments and initiatives and improvements in practice. When I first started nursing as well, when you had a heart attack and an infarct, you were in your bed for 7 days, and you were only allowed out on day 4 for half an hour to sit, and it was timed to the moment, and then you were in hospital for 14 days, all told. Nowadays they're out within 5 days, if not less, and it makes me feel old, but at the same time, it's great to be able to see those developments. Also, IT and electronics, never heard of. We learned by blackboard and book. We had no internet, no nothing, whereas now, from the early 2000s, when I then became a lead nurse, or clinical nurse manager, as was at that time, we started becoming a bit more electronically minded, which scared me quite considerably at that particular point, because I'm not tremendously IT literate, though I have improved over the years. The ward managers had to learn all of these new skills, and nowadays everything's electronic. There's very little that we don't communicate with on paper. Everything's through email, internet, or such like. I've had a tremendous 45 years, and the thought of that as well scares me to think I've been here in and around the Royal Infirmary for more than 45 years. I've had a great time. I've had great memories. One especially so of the very recently retired chief nurse here, John Stewart, who was a first ward student with me, and we had a problem one morning with the toilets, and was reported duly to the plumbing department. Somebody en route, the next minute comes down to tell me that it's all right, Big Willie sorted it. What do you mean Willie sorted it? Now, Willie was the other student who used to be a plumber, and Willie repaired my toilet, which was very kind of him, but I had to explain to the plumbers without getting any union involvement that there wasn't an issue anymore within my toilet area. So he would get me in trouble on many occasions, that man. I also have a vivid memory of an elderly lady in the ward across from me who was quite immobile, but managed to climb out of the window in the doctor's room and onto the windowsill. And me, with 2 colleagues, I think they might have pushed me to the windowsill, but me sitting in the windowsill, trying to support her and encourage her to come back in the window, as I was being photographed by Chinese tourists within Cathedral Square. At the same time, there was sirens of fire engines coming up the high street in support of our incident, but thankfully it all ended well, and the lady came in safely, and afterwards was probably none the wiser of everything that had gone on. So I've had great memories, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege for me to be part of the GRI over these last years, and I have no doubt that it will continue to be a forerunner and a fabulous place for people to work and learn and support patient care and treatments over the coming years. Thank you.